Okay, so happy Tuesday. We're almost to the end of the year, and I can't thank you all for coming out enough for another PD session looking at Zoom meetings. We have several of them in our PD series. This is the Zoom Advanced session, which acts as a refresher, but also tries to bring a number of new features to your attention. And it will be followed next week by a learning and teaching special, which focuses particularly on teaching with the tool rather than perhaps the technical tool set. All of them are recorded. All of them go into the Professional Learning Hub, which I'm sure all of you know, but I will provide links to all that stuff as we go through the session. Just me today. Jed is homesick, has a sick kid, and so it's just me flying the ship. So if I'm a bit slow in responding to things or moving my head around like a clown at the circus, it's because I'm looking at chat pods and windows and other things, and I will get to your questions as I can. So I think we better kick things off. There are a lot of features in this product that just continually get updated and surprised. I've been surprised 3 times this morning, which is great because it means you will as well. And we will get into that right now. So let me turn off YouTube in the background. It's not distracting me. So before I go through the list of things that we're going to be covering today, I would just ask you to check. Are you up to date with your Zoom settings? We are currently on 5.8.4. So if you are not sure what version that you're on with Zoom, do open your Zoom desktop app. So you can find the Zoom icon on your desktop or in the taskbar down the bottom. We're looking for this square window with its boxes. And if you click on your profile image in the corner and go halfway down, 2/3 of the way down and click on check for updates, it will tell you. And what we're looking for hopefully is 5.8.4. If it's 5.8.3, that's fine for today. If it's before that, I would suggest that you jump out of the meeting quickly and update, because it won't update whilst you're in a live meeting, and then rejoin, but that's not a deal breaker if not. A couple of the things I'm going to show you today require 5.8.3 or above, and if you need to do that, by all means do so. It's not, you're not going to hurt my feelings at all. There are a couple of very interesting new features that have just come out with Zoom, which you might find novel or incredibly helpful, but you can find out all about those by clicking on this release notes link, which will open this Zoom page, and it'll tell you what we've got and what's coming up in the updates that they're releasing. I would suggest of interest to most people is that the next update at the end of November for Zoom will include automatic updates. Thank God. That's all I could say, rather than checking every month. Can I share the link to that page? I absolutely can. But once that next update at the end of November rolls around, it will mean we don't have to keep checking for updates. If there's a new version, it will install it for you. So that will be rolling out at the end of November. Couple of others, there's sort of improved slide control for people being able to move slides if they're not the host, but I don't know that those are critical type features. The ones that I'm going to talk about today, particularly, the one that I'm particularly enamored of is to do with live transcription, and I'll show you all about that shortly. But let's move right along. I can see we have Warwick Baines in the waiting room. There we go, let Warwick in. Welcome, Warwick. Let's keep going with the session for today. We're going to do some quick refreshers, talking about waiting rooms, recordings, the Zoom portal, some of the settings in there. We will look at the LTI tool inside Blackboard, some do's and don'ts with that tool, things to be aware of. If you're using either the reports from the back end or the LTI to take attendance, for example, we will have a brief look at breakout rooms, not a long look, that will be next week, but a brief look. We will look at polls, and that's particularly important because there is a new polling tool set in Zoom that has just been released, and I will expose you to that because it's no longer just multiple choice questions. a little bit of a look at screen sharing. We might move that closer to the top, get through the refresher stuff quickly. As I said, please feel free to drop things into the chat, and I will keep doing this as we go and responding as I can. All right, waiting rooms. In case you're not aware, CSU as a security protocol has turned on waiting rooms for all Zoom accounts. And what that means is that people who have not signed into Zoom, so gone specifically to charlessturt.zoom.us and clicked on sign in, or signed into the CSU staff portal or into the LMS, into Interact 2, will be registered as guests when they join a Zoom meeting. And what that means essentially is that when you try and join a Zoom meeting as a guest without having signed in, you'll be put into the waiting room, which a couple of you would have experienced this morning, and the hosts in the meeting will experience this view. I'm sure you've seen it before. In your participant pane, you'll get a message that basically says, such and such is in the waiting room, and you need to click on an admit button to let them into the room. If people have signed in, and that guest is a giveaway, basically, it says they're not signed in, they pass straight into the room. So you can see, for example, Jennifer straight into the room this morning, she's signed in. So it's important that you keep reminding yourself. I usually sign into this portal probably once a day and then forget about it. And your browser will remember that you've signed in. But yeah, it can be important. It does get annoying after a while. Obviously, if you want to join meetings and you're waiting for someone to remember to let you in, but you can also remind your students. If you're signed in and you've gone through Blackboard, for example, to join a Zoom meeting, then you come straight into the meeting room. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck there waiting for the academic to let them in. All right, so that is waiting rooms. As such, passwords are turned off. We don't have them turned on, but you can individually turn on a password entry to your meeting rooms if you wanted to do that. We don't use registrations for our meetings. Again, it's a feature that can be turned on if you're wanting. We usually use it for external events where we have people outside the uni signing up for things. That feature is turned off. Single sign-on is turned off as a mandatory feature, which means that guests, people outside CSU can join our Zoom meetings. They don't have to have an account with us to join. So that is turned off. So moving right along, screen sharing. It's arguably the most used feature of using Zoom. You need to be across it, and the fact that new features are made available by Zoom to do with screen sharing constantly. If I bring my screen over here, at the moment, by default, guests and students cannot share in a Zoom room, but you can change that feature with one click by looking at your security button. And you'll see that there is an option here to allow participants to share their screen. So it's worth clicking on that to find out whether or not you've got it turned off or on. For me, by default, hosts and co-hosts can share. And if people want to share, I need to make them a co-host. But if I wanted to just make anyone able to share, you can turn that on under these security features, allow participants to share their screen. When we do click on share screen, we're presented with 3 tabs: basic, advanced, and files. Probably 99% of the time we're using this first one. Share your first screen, and whatever's dragged onto that screen, opened on that screen, will appear and be shared with the audience. If you're using multiple monitors, maybe you want to share what's on the other one. I don't really use the whiteboard ever because I don't like trying to draw with a mouse, etc. The only people I know that do are in subjects where they use a stylus, for example, and they're trying to write things. But most of those people also have their own devices for that sort of operation rather than using a Zoom whiteboard. You can join any Zoom meeting using the Zoom mobile app. It's not exclusive to iPhone or iPad, so I sort of dismiss that share option. I just join the meeting from another device and share from it. The row underneath on the first screen refers to sharing application windows. So for example, I've got Google Chrome happening and a bunch of different tabs inside there, and I can share just Google Chrome inside the Zoom meeting if I want to. I'd avoid using those sharing options. They get a bit confusing to remember that you're not actually showing what's on your whole screen. You're sharing an application window. I find it a bit superfluous if I can just remember whatever I've got going on my screen is what I'm sharing. And down the bottom, it's important that you remember that if you're sharing media of any sort, you need to remember to be able to share the sound. And if you're playing back media, YouTube, other media from different websites, you need to click this second box, optimize for video clips. Otherwise, the individual connections of users and their bandwidth in the meeting will be impacted, and now some of them will lag, basically. Clicking the optimize button will make sure that the playback is smooth for everybody in the meeting, unless they have absolutely terrible internet. At that point, they're going to have problems no matter what they're doing. It also helps with the playback of media in the recording. So that's a separate consideration. We're not always allowed to capture in a recording the stuff that we're playing back, but if you are and you want it to play back smoothly, you'll need to have this box checked. Second tab, think about the advanced tab. Some of you may be familiar with the PowerPoint as virtual background feature. That will allow you to upload PowerPoint slides that will sit behind you and have you talking and moving around and presenting to the slides as part of your background. You'll need a green screen for that to work, or at least a single color wall behind you. It is fun to use. It may just be a novelty for you, or something that you want to use as part of your teaching. Have a play around with that. You can identify a portion of your screen to share, which will involve you dragging and dropping, outlining a section of your monitor to share within the room if you wanted to do that. Mostly I've seen people do this who only have a single monitor and still want to be able to organize part of their screen that's just for them and another part that they want to share. So it's usually a feature that's just used by someone with a single monitor. You can just share your audio with the meeting participants. So when I have music playing, when you join the meeting, that's all I'm doing is just sharing audio from the computer and not my whole screen. You can do that. You can share video within the meeting. If you've got a video file saved on your computer and you want to play it back in the meeting, you can do that. But to be honest, most of us would play back video from our computer anyway, using another type of media player, and just share it using these options, sharing the sound or the video clip. You don't need to load the video into Zoom for the people in the meeting to watch it. And if you're using document cameras plugged into the computer, you might be interested in this other option, which is the content from a second camera. In terms of files, this is a bit of a red herring. I would avoid this panel. It's referring to Zoom integration with other products like OneDrive, Google Drive, or SharePoint. And all it does is open a box for you to explore your files in those cloud-based platforms to share into the meeting. You could do that yourself and find those files and then give the links to people. You don't need to use these integrations. They can get a bit confusing trying to share them in the chat pod that way. So there's a refresher on sharing very quickly. I'll stop there for 2 seconds and see if anyone has any questions at that point before I continue. All good? I'm not seeing the security icon. Okay, Mark, it's going to be a feature in your settings that you'll need to look for in your Zoom settings. If you go into the back end in the portal, click on settings and search the word security. Just do a Control F and search security. You'll find the option to turn off and on security features. Good question. Okay, let's keep going. In terms of your recordings, the reason I'm bringing this up particularly is we're going to look at settings related to individual recordings in the back of Zoom and in the LTI tool and why you need to know about those. You're probably aware, as we cover this in the basic section, others, you can't really edit a Zoom recording. All you can do is trim the playback range, which they call topping and tailing. So if you, for example, you were to go into Zoom and find a recording in your recording section, let me open a new panel for that. I'm going to go into the Zoom portal, sign in, go to my recordings. and I've decided that this particular recording I want to have a look at. So I click on it and it will give me this summary page. It will show me all of the different file types that are available associated with this recording. So you can download just individual ones or you can delete them. You can get a link to each particular file type. You don't have to get just one link that will give everyone everything. You can just provide a link just to an individual part of the recording. You can change the name of the recording up the top by clicking on the pencil there and change the heading. We'll come across why this is important in just a second. But if you want to change the length of the recording, you need to click on the play button. It will open in a new browser window for you. It'll start loading as long as you are the host. Thank you, Crystal. And thanks, Crystal. I will also drop in. There we go. Let's pause that. All right. Inside the playback, down the bottom, once you're logged in as the host, you will see bottom right-hand corner a pair of scissors that says set the playback range. If you click on that, you'll see handlebars to the left and the right of the continuum for the file. You can drag those in and edit where the file will start and stop. I will say again, this is not changing the permanent recording itself. If someone downloads it, they get the whole file. All this is the playback of the cloud recording. Okay, that's it. If you click save at this point, that file will only play back from this point to this point. You can't change anything in the middle. It's not going to work. You're going to need to edit the recording in some other way if that's a problem for you. And most people that are doing that are downloading it, putting it into something like CSU Replay or Panopto, and then editing the file at that point. But in terms of the cloud recording, this is the only way you can change how a Zoom file will play back. All right, I will cancel. I'm not doing that at this point in time. Let's go back to my slide. So that's topping and tailing, locating them in your recordings folder. The fact that you can download different types of files from that backend. If you just want audio, or you just want a transcript, or you just want the gallery view, if you're using gallery views, etc., you can get each of those individual file types from the back end. But when your students see a recording file, as we were looking at a second ago, they'll get an option to download, only one button to click on up the top right-hand corner, download, and you'll see 5 files. Thank you, Crystal. And I will also drop in, I wish it would stop doing that. Okay. They get all of those. So if you've got gallery view turned on for recording, speaker view, the chat file, the transcript file, the audio file, they're going to get a whole lot of files appearing down the bottom when they click download. It can be a little bit annoying. So you need to check really what type of files you make available. The other thing I would bring to your attention is that every recording in the back end of Zoom has a share button that you can click on in this summary screen. And when you click on it, it will give you the option to change the security settings just for that recording. So you can, if you've got a recording that you've made that you don't want to be made available, but you still want to leave it there, you can change the security settings. Do you want it to be shared or not? You can turn that off. Do you want an expiry link on it? If you wanted to go to that extreme, I guess you could make it available just for a week or something. Do you want people to be able to download the file or not? Just watch it or not? You can turn that off here. Do you want them to be able to see the transcript, see the chat files, etc.? Those settings you can toggle against every individual recording if you wanted to do that. By default, our students can download the recording files, watch the recording, get the transcript, all that kind of stuff. So it's really on you if you wanted to change those for any particular reason. Okay. The last thing I wanted to mention about recordings whilst we're here is that if you click on the pencil above the main title of the recording, you can change the recording name. And the reason that that's important is if we're looking at a subject site, I'll go into an I2 site here. We have the Zoom LTI tool. It's called Online Meeting Zoom that you can open up and your students open up to access their Zoom meetings and recordings. Just wait for this to load. This creates a connection between your Zoom account in the back end and the subject side. The students will be able to see meetings that are coming up, meetings that have already passed, happened. You as the host get access to a report about those meetings. So if you want to see who attended, you can click on that report button and that will tell you. You can get, you can also export this document if you wanted an Excel sheet as a evidence of attendees, for example. You can get hold of that from the report. To navigate inside the LTI tool, you need to use these things we call breadcrumbs. There's no simple way to get back, so you need to click on these headings to take you back to other sections. And the last part, the cloud recordings. Any recordings that have been made from a LTI launched meeting will appear in the cloud recording session automatically for the students. They get to click on it and watch the video files or download the audio or the video. The reason I'm talking about this now with recordings is that I get asked all the time with this tool, how do I change either the names of the meetings? And the answer is, if you've created a series of meetings recurring, you can't change the title. You've either got to create them one by one with different unique titles, or give the title something that's informative enough that it will work. So this is saying evening meetings for this particular subject. Okay. But what you can change is your recording titles. So you can come back in as the host. You have to be the host that created the meetings, and change the title in the back end in your recordings portal. So you can see this one, Introduction to Australian Legal System Evening Meetings. How's that for a mouthful? Let's say that we wanted to change this so that it showed it was week 1. I can locate the recording. There it is. Bring up the summary. Change the title by clicking on the pencil. I can add in week 1, for example. I hit save in the back end. And now going back to the portal, if I refresh, into the recordings, and you'll see the new titles there. So it refreshes automatically. So you can't change the names of the meetings, but if you want your recordings to be more informative and have a particular topic in them, for example, or something explicit, you can change those in the back end. It will update in the portal. That's about all we can get from this tool, from the LTI tool. Okay. I'll stop there for a second. There's usually some questions about the LTI of some sort, if anyone has any, or about recordings in general. Would anyone like to ask anything specific at this point in time? Not so much?
Lachlan, Warwick here. Just a question about analytics on watching viewings of the recordings. Mm-hmm. How easy is that to get? How can we find out how many times the students watched the recording of the meeting, or who's watched it? No,
unfortunately not. We don't get that sort of analytics at the moment from this integration, as opposed to Panopto, for example, where we used to be able to get that, because that was pulling the, whilst the reports that we get in here will tell us who's attended, the only other information we can get about it at the moment is if they've answered polls, what poll questions they've responded to. That's the only other piece of information we get.
So we can't tell how many times it's been viewed.
No,
yeah, okay.
No, not from the LTI tool, unfortunately. Yeah, Lisa, it's being recorded, absolutely. So it'll go into the Professional Learning Hub. Yeah, so the analytic tool set that's available from the Zoom integration is not amazing. Unfortunately, it doesn't really tell us much about the users using the product. I don't know if that's different with another LMS, if we move to another product, for example, in a year or whatever the case may be, if it's more informative, but I'll look into that because it's worth knowing if that's also going to be part of what's available.
So, Lachlan, if it was important for us to get user data, then it would be better to transfer that Zoom recording into Panopto, where we would then get those analytics.
Yeah, it's a good point, Stuart. I suppose we obviously don't want to create more work for people handling the same file multiple times. But if there was a resource that had been made that was particularly important for us to track, and particularly if it was going to be used ongoing in multiple offerings of the subject, I would suggest it needs to come out of Zoom and go into another resource like Panopto so that we can track it and also preserve it, because that's the other piece of pertinent information. Zoom recordings will only last in the cloud for 365 days. From the day that you make it, that countdown will start, and you will see against each of your recordings that counter, how many days left for each of those recording files. So I'll bring that up. You can see here when you look at your recordings, how many days are left against each of them. And once it gets close to the deletion, the process happens 7 days out from the file being removed from your account. You'll get an email that says you've got recordings about to be deleted. So you've got 7 days to download it and upload it into Panopto, for example, or YouTube if you're using YouTube, that sort of thing. After that, once it passes the 365-day point, it will go into a temporary folder for 1 month. And the only way to get that file back at that point is to contact DIT to log a show or request saying, I've got a recording that's been moved into the deleted folder. Can you get it back for me? They can move it back for you, but again, it will only last for another 7 days. So it's not kind of an indefinite recalling of the video file. It's just a temporary reprieve if you get to that point. So
sorry to harp on the analytics, but I just looked on my back end on recordings, and I ran a meeting last night, and it says the recordings had 2 views so far.
So in the back end here, so not in the LTI tool, right? In the back end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you can get some analytics from the Zoom portal rather than the LTI. Sorry, I thought we were talking about the LTI tool. So yes, you can go into the detail around the recording, and there is a button at the top, recording analytics, and it'll tell you views and downloads. Sorry, does that help a bit more, Warwick, that
Yeah.
detail?
Yeah.
So it's not going to tell you who they were, for example, things like that, because that relies on the Blackboard integration aspect of it, but you can see downloads and total views. That's a good point. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. Yeah, things like transcripts, etc. You can certainly turn off and on in your settings in the back of Zoom. So if you're looking for any of these particular settings and you're not sure where to find them, always open up your Zoom settings at the back and just do a search. So Control F to find the appropriate settings. So if I was looking for transcripts, for example, start to type it, and you'll find that there are a number of options probably that have that word, but there's one here, allow participants to save fully closed captions or transcripts, turned off or on. So if you can't see that option, you don't know where it is, you just search for it in the back end underneath by doing a Control F search to find where it is in your settings area. I've got a section there on pros and cons of cloud versus local. Very rarely do people need local files saved on their computer video files. They're very big, and it's usually people that want to go and store the video file somewhere else. So if you want to upload it into Panopto, you'll need a local recording. Same if you want to put it into YouTube. Some people just want to back up their recordings and have them on local storage, a USB or something. You can download to the computer and get that file. If you've done this by mistake at times and you're not sure where to find the file, which I'm sure a lot of people have done, all Zoom recordings by default, the storage folder is in your documents folder. So if you find documents, look at the folders inside there, you'll find a folder called Zoom. And then each recording will have a folder created as you go where the local recording will be stored. Now, the reason I've got so many in here is to do with the chat file. If you've ever saved the chat file or the transcript from the chat pod, it will only save that locally. So the moment that you've turned that on, capture the chat, each of these folders will find has the chat file saved as a text file inside. That's why it's created that folder for me. I haven't saved all those recordings locally, but the folder has been created. So that's where you would find it. Okay. Thank you, Warwick, for your honesty. It happens to all of us. Okay, the Zoom portal. We've been looking through the Zoom portal. I don't know that we need to spend too much time on this, except that you're going to be going in and looking at your settings regularly to check why you can or can't see things. You know, don't beat yourself up about it. I keep doing it pretty much daily to find out why I can't do certain things. With that in mind, I would like you to see a new feature that's come up that I only learned about this morning from one of the recent updates, and it is to do with transcription, live transcription in our Zoom meetings. So I'm going to try and find it inside my settings. I'll do a search. Let's look for, well, we'll try transcript and see what we can get. Transcription. And we can see when I do that search that there is now an option under closed captioning that says allow live transcription service to transcribe the meeting automatically. Now, if you search for this, you're going to find that this is probably turned off. I would turn it on, definitely. I'll see if there's any other option in there about transcription. It's coming under a closed captioning feature, which has just been turned on. So I want to see if I can now turn this on. Let me show you what it looks like in our Zoom meeting room. If I go down to the bottom, I can now see live transcript. And at the bottom of this, there's a feature called Enable Auto Transcription. Turn it on. And now what you'll be seeing inside our meeting room as I'm talking, you'll get the text running across our meeting. Can everybody see that? It's pretty neat, and it's actually picking up not only what I'm saying as I'm doing it, but it also continually checks and adjusts and fixes itself against the recording file at the same time. It's pretty neat. So, you know, we get asked about accessibility features and captioning, etc. This feature has just been made available with updates. So if you've updated to 8.3 and above, you'll be able to get hold of it. So you can see it's fixing itself as I'm speaking. I will say it's particularly fun to try and get it to pick up swear words. It actually filters them out and changes them to similar words like fox or sheet or something like that, for example. Try and get Zoom to pick up swear words. It's great. All right, so that feature, live transcriptions, I'm going to be leaving on in this meeting just so you can see that rolling, and we will keep going. You'll see it's appearing for me over here in the share screen. So obviously it's important that I see it as I'm going. All right, so let's keep going. The LTI tool, we had a look at the tool already. I will just point out a couple of ways that it's used most commonly at the moment. And if you've got questions at that point, by all means ask them. We looked at a subject site before. It was a law subject site. And in that site, they have two Zoom related items in the subject menu in the navigation bar. They have the LTI tool, online meeting Zoom. They've also got a Zoom resources item, which shows the students a schedule for when the meetings are occurring and the topics. So this is probably directly to deal with that question of how do the students see the topics for each week's meeting? The obvious answer to that is it could be in your subject outline in the schedule there. We can create individual meetings inside the LTI tool, which is a bit cumbersome, 12 different meetings with different titles if you wanted to do that, or you could have a separate area in the nav bar where you provide that table. The other reason that they use it in this particular subject is for associated resources with the Zoom meeting. So if you've got slides, files, other things you want the students to have, we can't give it to them inside the LTI tool, which I will launch now. So we can contrast to that. We'll just wait for that to launch. Yeah, there's no way for us to give files to students apart from the recordings inside this tool, which is, I think, probably a bit of an oversight, obviously, because we've got things that we provide to students in the meetings. How do we share them? Either we're sending individual announcements out later with the files attached to it, or putting them in the subject site somewhere. It can get frustrating. You will find that this is quite common, that people have a separate area in the subject site where they provide those separate files. So the PowerPoint slides. Providing the link to the recordings, I don't know, that's a bit superfluous because that's the whole point of the LTI, is to give those details. Speaking of the LTI, if you haven't used this tool before, when you create meetings for the subject, you click on Schedule a New Meeting. Up the top, it has most of the same options that you get in the back end. Give it a title, decide whether or not, don't bother with a description. It's not visible to people unless they go down a fairly deep rabbit hole. But decide when the meeting's on and whether or not it's going to be recurring. That's a good question, Kartika. I'll get to that in just a second. You can choose recurring. For example, if it's a meeting that occurs every week, recurrence weekly, recur for how many weeks? Well, maybe I want it to recur. Yeah, I just want it to recur every week, not every fortnight, for example. Tuesday, I'm going to say, instead of finishing by a particular date, I want 12 of them. So you can choose the second option. So if I'm saying there's going to be 12 in the session, at that point, I probably won't go through with submitting this because I might upset the academic whose subject site this is. But this is the setup that I'd be going through if I was creating Zoom meetings for the whole session. As I said before, the waiting room is on by default, but the other security settings are off. Decide whether you want video off and on by default. It's off for most of us by default. Then you've got the option then to decide whether you want participants to join before you. This setting is important, but you need to consider it alongside automatic recordings. A lot of people turn on the automatic recording so that the session kicks off. Maybe you've got a sessional teaching into the subject and you set everything up for them and they just want to come in and teach and not have to worry about turning on recording or off, etc. Then you would have this ticked and in the cloud so that it appears inside the LTI for everyone. However, at that point, you cannot have this turned on, enable join before host, because what that means is that students will come in there without a host, join the meeting. They're being recorded without their permission at that point automatically. We can't have that, which means you've got to turn enable join before host off so that you are in the meeting before the recording starts. Okay, so it's just a feature. If you're going to have enable join before host on, turn off the automatic recording and the person will need to remember to turn on the recording. Obviously tell the audience, I'm going to be recording this session and turn it on. At that point, it's kind of a one or the other point. If it's important for you to allow students to use the Zoom rooms without you being there, fine, set them up, turn that on and they can go crazy, but you can't have automatic recording on. Okay, the advanced options also allow you to add alternative hosts to the Zoom room. However, you don't need to because the integration is connected to the subject site. So if you have any other instructors, full staff access, markers, etc., added to your I2 site, they will be able to come in as an alternative host to the Zoom room and use it without issue. So you don't need to worry about adding all their individual emails. If they can get into the I2 site and they're not a student, they will be able to access the Zoom room as a co-host. Right, so it's really just a notification. At the moment, it's picked up who the other instructors are in the subject site. So Leanne's in there, for example, she's already picked up. So if you save those, it'll create your list of 12 meetings inside here. So the students already get a schedule, dates, times, etc., the topic, and they can join the meetings. So the LTI tool cuts a lot of corners, but it doesn't do everything perfectly. Now, Kartika, your question about how do we send calendar invites to Zoom meetings? Okay, I'll BCC as in the setting in Outlook so that they can't see who the other people are. Is that what we're getting at with BCC?
Yes, that's right. Because there was an issue with students being able to see the email of other students when I share the meeting invite. So I just want to avoid that. but at the same time, have something in their calendar so that they know that this is coming up.
Okay, so it's not really, it's not going to be through the integration necessarily, but you'll need the link. So there's two ways of going about this. One of them is if you want to use the Zoom tool in Outlook, the Zoom integration with Outlook to book the meeting, or if you want to create a Zoom meeting in here already so that it's sitting inside the LTI tool and then add it to an Outlook invite. Which one of those would you like to look at?
The easiest one.
The easiest one. Okay. I would suggest maybe using the Outlook one. Let's do that. So let me bring Outlook up. Just launching in the other window. Come on, Outlook. Sorry, I always close Outlook before I do PD so that I don't get emails cropping up, etc. All right, look, in Outlook, what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule a new meeting request. And I'll drag that across so you guys can see it. All right, so I've got a new meeting request in Outlook. At this point in time, if you're going to use the BCC option, I wonder. Yeah, so this is how it would be. Why can't I see BCC and CC? Far out. When we do an email, for example, you know how you get your CC and BCC at that point, you click on CC and then you can start sending things BCC, right? That way. I would arguably get the Zoom link manually from somewhere else and then put the Zoom link in here rather than try and use the LTI tool. Am I making sense? Sort of, not really. So if I have the information for this meeting, I'm not the host, which means I can't get the invitation from here. Let's have a look at join. What's that going to do? It's probably going to launch Zoom and kick me out of this. So let's stop doing that. No, I don't want to leave the other one. Forget it. All right, let's get a Zoom link from my settings. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Let's say I've got a Zoom meeting coming up. This one. All right, if I click on the meeting information in the back end of Zoom, I can get the invitation over here, copy invitation, right? Which gives me the link, all the dial-in details, etc. for my external users. I'd grab that, go back into my email, CC, then BCC, put in the addresses for whoever I need to in there, and paste the invitation details to the Zoom meeting. That's my take on the easiest way to do it. Get the meeting information from the back end, open up Outlook and paste the invitation in. I'll think about that scenario after this session, but that's my first take on what I'd do there. Okay, let's keep going. I know I always get way behind with Zoom stuff. Let's look, not at attendance, boring. Let's go to polls. Zoom has just introduced a bunch of new poll features. And I better bring up my Zoom meeting so I can still see the chat. Previously in polls, when we looked at our meetings, you could create polls as the host and only the host, either in the live meeting or in the back end. When I'm talking about the back end, we have a look at a particular meeting. See those live transcriptions still working away down the bottom there. Let's look at the meeting for, I don't know, that one. If I click on the meeting information, scroll down to the bottom and you will see that we have a poll section down the bottom and you have the option to create polls. You can do this from the back end before a meeting starts, for example, and then launch them from within that same meeting. Now, that transcription is kind of getting in the way of my shared screen, which is a bit annoying. I'll turn it off. Live transcription disabled. Okay. Let's do this again. Okay, so now underneath we've got poll. We also have an advanced polls option, which is new. If you've updated, you'll see this. We get advanced polls. Not only do we have single choice and multiple choice, we now have matching activities. We also have a ranking activity that you can run in the meeting. You also have short answer and long answer. And arguably, this is a feature that people have been asking for some time with the Zoom poll set, is to be able to launch open-ended questions and capture student responses that way. We can now do that with new Zoom polls. I have only just discovered this morning, so I haven't really had a chance to do much, but I do have one for you to have a play around with. So I've got an advanced poll where you get to put in a short answer up to 200 words. Let's launch the poll. And now the timer is going, and all of you should have seen in your Zoom room a lovely picture of Daisy saying, "How are you really feeling today?" And you get to respond to that in theory. Can everyone see that, or am I imagining this? Okay, someone's answered already. Fantastic. I note that I can't see the poll answers at the moment. If I go across and click on polls, no, I can't view the answers yet. I can only wait, I'm guessing, until the poll is finished. I will give you 5 more seconds. 2, 1. Thank you, everybody that's put those in. I can end the poll and now view the details or share the results. Details is going to open up who's put in what. Share results. Where are the damn results? It's telling me stop sharing. So I'm assuming that it's showed them somewhere. Are you guys seeing the results? Because I sure as hell can't see them.
Lachlan, I can see only mine. This is Ruhina. I can just see my answer, not everybody else's.
Yes.
That's pretty
Me too,
bizarre.
I can only see mine.
Thank you. If I click on view details, let's see what we get going here. Okay. If I click on the view results, I can bring them up. It opens them up in Zoom. All right, I think we've got some work to do here. That's not seamless within the meeting, I would say, if I have to open up multiple screens to see individual answers. But that was the short answer, 200-word open response, new Zoom poll activity type. Take it or leave it, I guess. Have a play around with those types and see if some of them work for you. It allows you to add an image and collect open answers like this. It's something. I'll stop sharing and we'll keep going. All right, presentation. How about we do that? All right, so reminder about polls. By default, only the host, the original creator of the Zoom meeting room, will be able to create polls, either in the back end or in the live meeting. However, at the bottom of your meeting settings, if we have a look again in the back end of Zoom, there is an option when you create a meeting that will allow co-hosts and alternative hosts to also edit your polls. So if you check that box, other people will also be able to add and create polls. So that's another setting to be aware of. Okay, let's keep going. Breakout rooms. Let's go through the experience of what breakout rooms, creating them, etc., editing them looks like. As I said, we don't spend a huge amount of time on them. Yes, Stuart, sorry, looking at your question, can you share polls communally? The multiple choice questions, when you create a poll in Zoom, you can launch them and share the results live so that people can see those answers coming in and the percentages. The type that we just did, the open response, I'm guessing no, because that option wasn't available to me yet, but I'll keep playing around with that. All right, so look, breakout rooms controlled by the host in the room, not the co-host, not anyone else, just the host will be able to turn on breakout rooms and create them. There are 3 phases with breakout rooms to be aware of. There is creation, edit, and live. You need to be aware that there are 3 because sometimes you'll get kind of stuck in the wrong stage of breakout rooms. But when you create them in the first instance, you decide the number of breakout rooms you want to create. So there's 20 people here. So if I said I want 4 breakout rooms, do I want the people in here to be split automatically? This is the one that most of us will tick. You can manually decide who goes into which room, or if you're creating a teaching activity, learning and teaching activity, for example, where people get a choice of which room, let's say you had a breakout room for specific purposes or functions, you could let the participants choose which one they wanted to go into. So if you're creating the breakout rooms in advance, given them specific titles, purposes, and you wanted participants to choose which one they go into, this is the box that you would tick that would allow them to go into whichever one they wanted to. By and large, to date, the way that this is used predominantly is we assign them automatically. It tells me down the bottom here how many people are going to be thrown in there based on the numbers in the room currently. We click create. I've just moved from the create phase to edit phase. Again, the reminder at the top, the breakout rooms have not started. So I can now edit the rooms. I can change their names if I wanted to. This one is going to be called winners. And second place, sorry guys, and others, etc. You can change the names, rename them, etc. You can also delete the rooms from up the top. Tells you how many are allocated to the room at this stage. If I launched it, again, the rooms are not live yet. We're in edit phase. We also have an options screen over here in bottom left, and that will allow us again to toggle some of those features. You can turn on the participant choice function. Do you want them to be able to jump out of those breakout rooms and come back at any time, or do you want to have control over when the rooms end? This third box here, automatically move them into those rooms when you launch them. I'd really suggest that you'd leave this ticked. If it's not ticked, tick it, because otherwise you're going to get people who are probably ghosting in the meeting, who just don't join and they're sitting there in the main room and you're like, why haven't they joined a breakout room? Tick this box. It will just put everyone into their rooms the moment that you launch them. Decide how long you want them to stay open. If you want them to close automatically, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Do you need a notification when the time is going to be up? Probably not. I'm guessing that you're the one that's decided how long they are. But also there's a countdown feature that allows participants and yourself to see that the room is going to close. And that usually allows for things like a last comment, parting comments, whatever. Don't leave it for minutes. It can get agonizing. Just 30 seconds or 60 seconds or something is probably heaps. All right, those are the options that you can toggle off or on in the edit phase. You can also add additional rooms in here if you need more or less. You could delete them. That all happens in the edit phase. Again, we're still not live. And then you have the launching of the breakout rooms. So I'm going to launch it quickly and see if it works. And the recording is still going, so I'm going to keep talking. Everyone's thrown into a breakout room at this point in time. And then I can use the broadcast message function. I will manually close all rooms now. And I've sent that message out, so I can now click close all rooms. So all of the participants will be getting a message that will then start shutting down the rooms. Welcome back as everyone starts coming back in. I can see down the bottom here that I'm getting a message about breakout rooms closing. They're all closing in 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. There's the timer kicking in. All right, and our breakouts, as they're finished, everyone rejoins. You as the host and your co-hosts, well, the host has ultimate control over breakouts. They can move people around. That includes co-hosts. Really what you, that's all there is to breakouts really, apart from classroom management type strategies about how you're going to handle the experience, moving people in or out, if you're going to come in or out, if you need announcements to the groups to let them know what to do. The main host is also able to share files between breakout rooms to everybody, but it's a bit ugly, that feature. It doesn't work in a seamless kind of way. So, you know, they're features that Zoom is constantly tweaking. I will say that we spend a lot more time on breakouts next week in the learning and teaching session, but I just wanted to go through the mechanics of launching them and what's involved this week. Anyone want to throw any curveballs at me about breakout rooms whilst I'm here, or shall I move on?
Is it still that you can't record in the breakout room, correct?
That's correct. Okay, sort of. You can record. Anyone inside the breakout rooms is promoted when they go into breakouts to effectively a co-host. So they can turn on recordings themselves at that point and capture what's happening in the breakout rooms. But it's not part of the main recording that's happening in the main room. So it's a yes or no answer, I'm afraid, Rahina, or maybe a no and yes. But yes, recordings can be done, but they must be done manually, separately inside the breakout rooms.
It's sort of like we have to nominate a student then, because that's where we are sending the breakout room, the students.
Yeah, so that comes back to that classroom management aspect. At that point, you're going to need to be organized in that sense and say, Rahina, you're going to be the team leader for breakout room 1 or something. I need you to be turning on record and capturing the recording. You as the host won't have access to that recording. That person will have access to that recording. So again, how much management of the situation and the activity, you might need to go into some kind of activity sheet on what they need to do for it, etc. So can be done. It's just not automated and seamless as such.
So Lachlan, can you just touch on that again? So if we send students into breakout rooms, they can record and we don't have access to the recording.
That's right. That's exactly right. Everyone in a breakout room is promoted to the role of a co-host.
Why can't we see the recording or hear the recording?
I'm going to need to look at it a bit closer and play out that scenario to get access to it. I personally, as an admin, can get access to all recordings ever. You know, don't let that scare you. No,
I'm just a bit concerned about letting students, because students can be clicking buttons, mate.
Yeah. Okay, well, you do have control using the security button in your taskbar to turn off the ability for anyone to record ever, breakout rooms or otherwise. So you can toggle it off at that point. But the default setting allows co-hosts and hosts to record. And if they're using breakout rooms, they're promoted to a co-host, which means they could record, unless you turned off that function in security rooms. Have I confused you enough there?
No. It's actually a little bit scary, yeah. So I know a lot of people using breakout rooms, and I bet you they don't know that. They think they can't record.
Yeah. Yep. They absolutely can, unless it's been disabled. And I appreciate that people have got to run, etc., because we've hit time. But
I have one question, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
If I have enabled screen sharing for all participants through the security feature, I usually do it through the share screen feature, that option there. Mm-hmm. If I've enabled it through the security feature, once they've moved to breakout rooms, does that continue? Do they still have the ability to share screens within the breakout room itself?
Absolutely. And it's because they're promoted to co-host anyway. So one way or the other, they're going to be able to share. Yep. Right,
because I found that I don't use a security feature. If I don't go into the share screen option and allow all participants to share, they don't seem to get that automatically, because they remind me when they can't share, despite you saying that they're automatically promoted to co-host. They're not.
So what I'm thinking is happening there is that you've got a setting in your Zoom portal in the back end relating to screen sharing for participants turned off, and it'll need to be toggled on.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's the live setting, gives you access to a lot of settings or controls that you can change, but everything is controlled in the back through your own personal settings.
Right. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Just a quick one, Lachlan. As the host of the meeting, when I do a breakout room, am I automatically included in one of those groups, or am I okay? So I can hop in and out of them at will.
Absolutely. Yeah. The host is not automatically added to rooms, and neither are the co-hosts. You'll find that they sit outside of them and they need to be manually allocated. Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, it's I suppose a classroom management type feature, I suppose, but it manually requires you as the host to jump in and out of the ones that you want to. There's a feature, and I'll dig into it a little bit more next week, that allows the co-host to also jump out of breakout rooms, etc. But by and large, ultimate control rests with the host. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Well, look, I'm going to stop the recording at that point anyway, because I know people have got to go, but I'm happy to hang around for 10, 15, whatever, if people have got particular Zoom type questions that they would like to ask me.